Arriving in the California Fresno Mission was just, I think I was in shock. I was really excited, but I think I was just super overwhelmed, and I was kind of running around kind of like a chicken without a head. Even though the mission leaders and everyone was so great at leading me, I was kind of starry-eyed and I don't know what I just got myself into. And I remember coming off the plane and accidentally thinking that a woman waiting for someone else was my mission president's wife. And so like I introduced myself to her and was like, "Hey, I'm Sister Ingram, I want to give you a hug." And she had no idea what was going on, and she looked kind of scared because all these missionaries then started being like, "Oh, is that Sister Gelwix?" And no, it wasn't. So then it's like, oh, that's my mission president and his wife. But I think that first day, the thing that stands out to me most was just kind of being shocked but excited. And throughout the day, as we went through in our mission, they have what they call Open Your Mouth, which I think a lot of missions probably have a version of that, but they would just send you out with a senior missionary and you would go knock doors and just start talking. That was the very first thing you did, and that was a shock, but it was exciting, and I felt like, okay, we're beginning this journey, and I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be good. So the California Fresno Mission, when I served there, was the largest mission in California at the time, which made us feel really cool because there's a tons of missions in California. And so we had, just in terms of land mass, the largest area, and we had a lot of missionaries. I think we peaked at over 300 at one point. So we went all the way up north to Modesto, and then our south border was just a little bit above Bakersfield. And so the best part about the Fresno Mission, and that I loved and I didn't realize, is just how beautiful that area is. Everyone always thinks of the coast and beautiful oceanside scenes, but the Fresno Valley is beautiful. We had the Yosemite National Park in our mission, so you had like the redwood trees and just these beautiful mountains and glaciers that you could go visit, and it's just a very fertile area, so fruits and vegetables and almond and garlic and so many other different things that I'd never eaten before, and it was just so fun to go tracking and to have orange trees that you could pick oranges off of. And I think one of the coolest things about the Fresno Valley is that it has the church's only vineyard. So there's a vineyard where the church owns it, and they make all the grapes that go to like the bishop's storehouse. And so all of the members in sort of the Fresno, Merced area, kind of within those stakes, go and they work on the vineyard. They just a part of their life, you know. In the spring they do something, in the fall they do something. Every ward has rows that they tend to, and so missionaries, if you're serving during harvest time, you get to go and like cut the grapes off and lay them down in the dirt for them to become grapes. So it's a lot of fun to go out there and do that with them. So I was called to speak an English mission, which is, I was very excited about that because I don't feel I have much of an aptitude for language at all. And so I thought, oh man, English, it's going to be great. But I wasn't quite prepared for how diverse the Fresno Valley is. In a lot of the areas that we served, there's Spanish-speaking missionaries, there's Hmong-speaking missionaries. There were lots of different nationalities that were quite heavily congregated in certain areas. So we would go tracting, like the whole street and neighborhood would be Hmong speaking. And so I wasn't quite prepared for like, oh, there are so many different people of so many different nationalities. As an English sister, I was like, oh, I'm not quite prepared for what to do when someone speaks Spanish or doesn't speak English. And so it was interesting having to pick up on some Spanish anyway, and just kind of figuring out how to love and learn and teach people of different nationalities, because I wasn't expecting there to be so many. The Fresno Mission is very hot. I was unaware of just how hot it could get. And so it's really important that you pack for hot weather. I remember I had these leather shoes. They were like really pretty $80 shoes from Nordstrom's. I thought I was just going to be the coolest sister missionary out there. But when I would walk with them in the heat, they would like shrink and I would get terrible blisters all over my feet. And so just be preparing in your wardrobe choices for the weather and making sure that you have very loose, comfortable clothing, especially for the hot summer months. I served in Fresno, Merced, Turlock, and Modesto. There's this stretch of highway that runs through the mission, and so they're just the major cities along that highway. So I just worked my way up and down. So Modesto was where I was trained, and it's a really beautiful area. It's a diverse area. So one part of Fresno is one part of Modesto is affluent, and then another part is much more humble. And so I felt really lucky because I got to serve in an affluent ward, but I also got to serve in the young single adult branch, which encompassed a lot of the more humble areas. And so it's a big sprawling city. It takes up a lot of area. It was one of the biggest cities in the mission, and there were just lots of different diverse experiences about Modesto. We did a lot of biking in Modesto. There's just a lot of crazy streets that go all the way around, and you feel like you're going through 3 different towns as you're biking through, but it was great. So Modesto is a fairly big city. Fresno is split up into like littler cities, more like suburbs and areas. So you've got like Fresno, and then you've got Clovis, and just these little other areas and suburbs inside of it. But Modesto is, I would say, equivalent to Fresno, but it's just Modesto. But definitely not skyscrapers, not a lot of metropolitan areas, but just lots of beautiful housing complexes and malls and littler malls all conjoined together. So the last area that I served in was Merced, California, and that was where I finished off my mission and is where I trained for the first time on my mission. And Merced's really beautiful, and there are a lot of just trees and houses, and it was also the area where I saw the most diversity just in terms of the types of people that I met. The other areas that I had been, mostly in more affluent areas or more suburbs, but Merced was where I was really able to meet people from all different walks of life. And you could meet someone who was homeless or who was struggling financially, and then go to a wonderful dinner. And so I felt grateful that I was able to meet lots of different types of people in Merced. The area that I served in Fresno was the ward boundaries that encompass the Fresno Temple. And so that's something really special for the members of Fresno, is that they have just this beautiful little temple just sitting in the middle of kind of this housing area. But it was really beautiful to go out every morning and to run around the temple, and you would think there are all these beautiful angels in white. So that was really special. And the part of Fresno that I was in was full of members. I wasn't quite expecting that. I was from Ohio. I thought, oh, if you're not in Utah, there's just not a lot of members. But Fresno has many, many, many members, and a lot of wards and a lot of stakes, and they're really, really active. And they're just so strong in the gospel, and they want to do missionary work. So Fresno was such a blessing in that way, because everyone was just there and loving of missionaries and wanting to work with the missionaries. It's really funny saying this, and I say it with a lot of love, but the area that I served in Fresno had a lot of sweet older single sisters and brothers. So it's definitely a lot of families who were working, and then a lot of single people who were just great family historians and temple workers. And so it was beautiful to get to kind of see the young families. I think most of them just were in business, kind of administration, that sort of thing. And then just this great, huge community of single brothers and sisters who did so much missionary work and family history work and many other things to support the gospel. So the next area that I served in was Turlock. And Turlock is on fire with missionary work. That was just the most active area for missionary work that I served in my entire mission. And it has a beautiful Hispanic culture there, which I really enjoyed as an English sister, because I would just hear all these amazing stories of the homemade tortillas that the hermanas would tell us about, and I never got to try them until I went to Turlock. And so it was a wonderful area with a vibrant, rich culture that was really great to work in. So that was the thing that stood out to me most about Turlock, was getting to experience another culture and another nationality. So when I was serving in Turlock, I was working with an investigator who lived in a halfway house. So he had kind of gone through drug rehab, and he wasn't quite able to live on his own, but there was just a house where a bunch of men lived to try to get back on their feet. And it wasn't in the best part of town, and they still kind of continued with their struggles. But I remember once we had gone to talk with him, and a bunch of his buddies from the halfway house were there, and they were kind of making fun of us, and they were joking, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing talking to those sister missionaries? You know, this is a crazy kind of thing." And I remember getting kind of fired up and looking at this whole group of kind of these big burly men with their cigarettes and their beer bottles, and they're kind of just joking around, and I pulled out my finger and I was shaking it at them, and I said, "Hey, I take this really seriously, and if you're not going to be serious about it, then we're going to go." And they all kind of like stared at me because I was much smaller and seemed more timid than they thought I would be, and they're like, "Yes ma'am, yes ma'am, we're sorry ma'am," and they all kind of quieted down, and we were able to finish the lesson. And it was a beautiful lesson, and I think it helped our investigator understand just how serious we were about teaching him the gospel. I don't know where that came from, but I just had so much love for this investigator that I wanted him to know how seriously I took teaching him, and that it was so important for me that he knew about Jesus Christ, and I wanted him to know that he needed to take it seriously too. We had the blessing of having 3 apostles come and visit our mission in one summer, and so one experience stands out. Elder Christofferson was coming, and the night before, I was just really struggling. I felt like my sacrifice as a missionary wasn't good enough. We'd been in a hard area. We weren't really seeing any progress. We didn't have anyone to teach, and I felt kind of just insignificant and very small. And I went into the bathroom that night, and I remember praying, "Heavenly Father, is my sacrifice acceptable to you? I just really want to know that what I'm doing is worth something to you, because I'll keep doing it if it's what you want me to be doing." And I went to the meeting with Elder Christofferson the next day, and it was a question and answer session, and it was a great meeting. And then I remember at the very end, he kind of stopped and he paused for a second, and he looked like he was pondering, and he said, "I feel like there are some people here who need to know if their sacrifice is acceptable to them or not." And my mind was blown. I was kind of like freaking out. I was on the front row, and I felt like he was just like staring right at me. But he said some really beautiful things just about knowing that our service is acceptable to the Lord and moving forward in faith. And I felt it was just such a blatant answer from Heavenly Father. It stood out to me just as evidence that God knows me and was grateful for my service and that I could move forward and be okay. I think the thing that stands out to me most about my MTC experience is actually my MTC companion. So when I got my mission call, I did what a lot of people do, and I posted about it on my blog, and I said, "I'm so excited to go to the California Fresno Mission." And about a day or two later, I get this comment from this random person who says, "Hey, I just got called to serve there too." And we ended up talking for about 2 or 3 months before I went to the MTC about everything we were excited for the mission. And it was really funny because the day before we went to the MTC, we kind of like were sending one last message to each other, like, maybe we'll cross paths tomorrow, like we'll keep an eye out for each other. And I got into the MTC, and I get a little packet that says, your companion's name on it, and it was her. And I just freaked out, and I was like, "No way, it can't be her. I've been talking to her for 3 months already." And so they sit you kind of in your room with your district, and I was sitting there waiting anxiously, and she walks in, and she's just like, "Sister Ingram!" And we ran up and gave each other a big hug, and everyone was looking at us thinking, "You're crazy, do you know each other?" And we're like, "We do know each other." So that was really special, and I think Heavenly Father just knew that we needed each other at that moment. So it was so cool to know my MTC companion months before we even knew we were going to be companions. One thing that I loved about my mission was all the children I got to teach. That was something I hadn't expected, but it turned out to be the most fruitful and rewarding part of my mission, was getting to teach families with lots of young children. And I was the oldest in my family, but I don't have a lot of memories of my younger siblings and taking care of them. And so children always kind of freaked me out a little bit. I was just like, I don't know how to talk to children. I'm scared of children. They won't listen to me. I didn't feel like I could connect well with children, but on my mission, their sweet spirits just blew me away, and I had so many opportunities of getting to teach them. And I remember we were working with one family with children, and we would ding dong ditch things onto their door as kind of like rewards and prompts for their next lesson. And so we would, have a gift for them, but then we'd also have, okay, the next time we come, we want you to read this chapter or make this list or memorize these commandments. And so it was fun. We did that every night for a week, and we would ding dong ditch, and we would run in our skirts in the dark down to our car, and it was great to look down the street and see them so excited about this little package that we had left them. So in the California Fresno Mission, everyone had bikes. I don't know if that's changed, but we definitely, even the sisters, everyone had to bring a bike with them to the mission. And the sisters also always had a car. So it's kind of this weird thing where every sister companionship had a car because there were areas that were unsafe, but you also had a bike. And so we were trying to do our due diligence and go biking, and unlike the elders, we didn't quite know how to take care of our bikes properly. So it had been a few months since I had ridden, and I went out and my tires were a little underinflated. And so I was going down, and it was kind of a foggy, wet day, but it wasn't raining. So it's like, oh, we're good. And I crashed. So I was trying to get up on the lip of a curb, and I just kind of fell over because my tire didn't have enough air in it to kind of like sustain going back up onto the sidewalk. And there was a guy with a Cash for Gold sign like right next to where I fell, and he kind of just looked at me and said, he laughed. I wasn't seriously hurt, so it was all right. But he just laughed and said, maybe you should stick to the bike lane or leave it to the professionals. And I said, okay, that's fine. And so we actually had a member come, and she inflated my tires for me. And then so we were biking on our way home, and I fell again, and I crashed. But this time I skidded across the pavement, and my little cute basket broke, and everything was on the ground, and it had started raining, and my companion was trying not to laugh because that was the only reaction she could think of at the time. And so I think it took a couple months before I rode my bike again. And then it was very, very tentative. We had the blessing of having 3 apostles come and visit our mission in one summer. And so one experience stands out. Elder Christofferson was coming, and the night before, I was just really struggling. I felt like my sacrifice as a missionary wasn't good enough. We'd been in a hard area. We weren't really seeing any progress. We didn't have anyone to teach. And I felt kind of just insignificant and very small. And I went into the bathroom that night, and I remember praying, Heavenly Father, is my sacrifice acceptable to you? I just really want to know that what I'm doing is worth something to you, because I'll keep doing it if it's what you want me to be doing. And I went to the meeting with Elder Christofferson the next day, and it was a question and answer session, and it was a great meeting. And then I remember at the very end, he kind of stopped, and he paused for a second, and he looked like he was pondering, and he said, I feel like there are some people here who need to know if their sacrifice is acceptable to them or not. And my mind was blown. I was kind of like freaking out. I was on the front row, and I felt like he was just like staring right at me. But he said some really beautiful things just about knowing that our service is acceptable to the Lord and moving forward in faith. And I felt it was just such a blatant answer from Heavenly Father. It stood out to me just as evidence that God knows me and was grateful for my service and that I could move forward and be okay.